Thank you all for coming today. I know some of you guys have stuff to do during B period, but we're here today to help with the Civics project, to give you guys a better understanding of how the town of East Long Meadow works. So I'd like to just take a second to thank all 4 of our town officials for coming. Yep, you guys can give them applause if you want. So I'm just going to introduce who they are very quickly, and then I'm going to give them the mic. If you could, please hold all of your questions for after they're done introducing themselves and talking for a little bit. So first, we have our town manager, Mary McNally. Town councilor, Connor O'Shea. School committee member, Sarah Truoiolo. And then our planning board member, Bethany, is it Yale? Yo, okay. So I'm just gonna hand them the microphone. You can pass it off however you would like. Do keep in mind, we do want to keep this very informal, so if you have any questions, again, at the end, please, we can give you the microphone, you can ask whatever you want, okay? So just pass it.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Sarah Truoiolo. I serve on the school committee here in town. This is my 4th year serving on the board. Last year I was the vice chair, and this year I serve as the chair. I'm also an educator. That was my previous experience. So I was in public education as a teacher for about 10 years, and now I work as an administrator in Springfield, and I help to oversee curriculum and design around mathematics. On the school committee side, as a member of that team of 5, we really help to oversee the policies within the schools. We work to craft budgets so that schools have the supplies, the salaries that they need to keep everything from the lights and the water running to making sure that you have the best materials available. We work to forward plan and think out what we need to do to ensure that East Long Meadow always has exactly what it needs when it needs it. We work to support the athletics department, all the extracurriculars, all kinds of good things like that. But we're keeping this informal, so I'll leave it at that for now, and who wants to go next?
Hi there, I'm Connor O'Shea, a town councilor in town, and I serve on the town council, which is one of the 2 branches of government that we have in East Long Meadow. So a lot of people think, when they think of branches of government, they tend to just think at the federal level, where you have your houses of Congress and the presidency and the judicial branch, but we have a similar sort of structure at the town level, because we have the executive side, which is the town manager, which Mary serves as, and then we have the town council, which is the legislative branch. And so that's part of our role here. I'll leave that as a quick introduction.
Thanks, Connor. Pardon my back, gentlemen. So my name's Mary McNally, as you just heard a couple of times, and I'm the town manager. My role here is basically to, I hate to use the word oversee, but in a way I have to oversee everything that happens within the town departments. So there are 18 departments on the so-called town side of things. Everything from police, fire, DPW, planning, very important department, one of the key departments. Our library, recreation department, council on aging, assessors, finance, treasury, the collector's office. So there's quite a variety of activities that all these departments have their own leader, their own department head. For example, Bethany leads our planning department, which also oversees the Conservation Commission. So you have to have sort of a variety of skills. In addition to all those things, part of my job, at least as I see it, is to help the department heads and their staff be as good at their jobs as they can be. I I try to leave people alone. That's my management style. I try to just say, you know what? I trust that you know what you're doing. If you need help, you know I'm here and I'm available. So I try to stay out of the way is, guess what I'm trying to say to you, and give them the respect that they deserve based on their own education and experience. There's a lot to the town manager's job that probably doesn't meet the eye of most people who live in town. Essentially, the town manager is responsible for creation of the town's budget, which is approaching $70 million a year. I'm also responsible for all the human relations, human resources functions. We have a number of labor unions who have contracts with us, and every so often those contracts expire and have to be renegotiated. And we're in the midst of that right now with 3. And we do all this and at the same time try to keep the taxes that people pay who own real estate in town at a reasonable level. So it's a real potpourri of service, but service is the key word. No one who works for a town government does it for the money. Although the money's not bad and the benefits are good, but the key to the whole success of everything is having a desire to try to make things better for the people you work with and the people that you serve. So I'm happy to take any questions after the fact if you have particular items of interest, but that's kind of it in a nutshell. So I'm going to yield the floor now to Bethany, who's in charge of so many projects that you're going to live to experience here. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Bethany Yo. I'm the East Longmeadow Planning and Community Development Director here in town. So essentially I help staff the Conservation Commission, the Planning Board, and the Zoning Board of Appeals. That means that any big developments in town have usually gone across my desk, reviewing them to make sure they have all the required elements based on our regulations and bylaws before they hit the board's review. I also help to apply for some grants for some fun projects in town. By Center Field, there's a small municipal parking lot, and there's some murals in that parking lot, and that was from one of the grants that went through my office with the help of DPW. So I work very closely with some of the other departments in town to make sure that these projects come through. I'm a department of 2, so we can't do too much manpower-wise, but I'm definitely there at the beginning of most large projects. And I know many of you have community service hours that you need to complete to graduate. And if you're struggling to fulfill those, feel free to reach out to me. We do have projects that are ongoing and that are one-time only, where we definitely need volunteers and we could put those community service hours towards. I'll hand it back to Eva.
Hi, my name's Ella. How do you determine what gets funding in the school systems?
So a lot goes into deciding what gets funded in the school system. We have to take a look at multiple competing priorities. We have lots of conversation regarding that. And then it depends in terms of funding sources. So we just met probably a month ago to talk about capital projects. And we take a look at each one of the schools in town, and we ask those leaders of the buildings to try to start to prioritize for us what they really see as the biggest need, the top 3 needs within their school. And then we try to look long-term and make decisions relative to, is it a roof? Is it doors and windows? Is it that we need to replace a gym floor? And we try to then decide what needs to happen now, and then what we might be able to put out 2, 3, maybe 5 years down the road. And then when we take a look at other items like additional salaries, additional positions, curriculum resources, all of those types of pieces, that is a long-term budget planning process that begins any day now alongside of Mary and the superintendent, our assistant superintendent for business, and the vice chair and myself. We'll work collaboratively alongside of those individuals, and then we'll bring our budget forward to the town council and work in collaboration with them. Because our school budget is set at one amount, and then in order to ask for more or in order to continue to improve services, then we need to work alongside of the town so we can ask for those funds to create opportunities for additional projects within the school system. But I think the biggest two pieces are, it's a long-term planning process that involves a lot of collaboration.
Why does school start so early?
So the question is, why does school start so early?
So part of why school starts so early is we have transportation that runs throughout our district. So in order to utilize buses, buses have to be recycled, they have to be reused. So we need to ensure that we have all of the schools getting the appropriate types of transportation services they need, while at the same time, back to, I think it was Ella's question, thinking about budgeting. If we had to have a fleet of buses for every single school, transportation is one of the biggest expenses a district faces, transportation and salaries of the educators who work in service of you every day. So school times need to be staggered, they need to be in alignment with allowing for those types of recycling of buses, but then also to make sure that families have the opportunities to go to work as well. So I think that's one of the main reasons is transportation.
So I'm doing my project on the art program in East Long Meadow High School and wanting more funding for it. So I have a couple of questions pertaining to that. How much money does the art program currently get funded, and how much more do you think that would increase without going extremely out of budget? Like, how much more do you think that we could get without really affecting any other significant group and taking away from other important things in East Long Meadow High School?
So I don't have the exact number offhand that the current art program is allocated. Maybe Frank does, or Gordon, but I don't have that spreadsheet with me right now. But those types of programs are obviously very important. That's part of educating, as you hear us talk all the time, the whole child. So wanting to make sure that each student has the opportunity to find opportunities for success and joy in school, and whether that's art or athletics or math or English or civics, whatever that might be. So I think to say what's the appropriate figure, well, depending on what you like, the appropriate figure is probably never going to be enough, because if you really enjoy something, you're going to want to see that maxed out. So trying to find that balance. I can certainly work to get that number for you. I don't know. I don't want to put Frank on the spot too, if he knows, or Gordon. But we can certainly find that out and then give you that information if it helps with your project.
So the high school actually has, with the largest amount of students, has the largest building-based budget. And so within that budget, the high school then funds each of its departments. Now, even within that, one of the things that we do on a curriculum end is we have an ongoing 5-year cycle where departments have a chance to look at their curricular needs, and we then have money that we can put towards those needs when that department gets to the point of the cycle where they can start to purchase new things. So that might be a year where, say, the art department gets a boost in their departmental budget. But Mr. Page probably could speak to how, on a yearly basis, departments look at their budget from the building-based budget.
And I guess I can talk a little bit about how we break it out in that building-based budget in terms of classes that we say use consumables. The visual arts department, the fine arts department, our family consumer science classes, and then our science classes are all departments that fall under those classes that have consumables connected to their curriculum. So, obviously like art supplies, lab supplies, culinary arts class, you're talking about like food supplies. And what we typically do is we budget out based on previous year's costs per class. So we base it on the number of classes that we're running. We also look at projected increases based on things like inflation. We try to keep that number consistent so we can project out what we have available for those classes, but also, needs of other departments as well. So I can kind of sit down and map that out with you. If you want to ask some more detailed questions, I'd be more than happy to do so. But every year at the high school level, we're looking at, in terms of art supplies and the budget that goes into that from my accounts, the consumables, So we're looking more specifically at the supplies. We're looking at bigger things like potential curriculum overhauls. That's where it would go to that curriculum renewal process that we have.
how much money does the school make each year?
Do you mean what the budget for the school department is? Like serving as a school committee member, how much money do I make? Oh, the stipend, sorry, I was not understanding the question at first.
There's also activities like dances and stuff like that, and like food, and you guys make money off of it. Like how much would you make in a year?
In terms of fundraisers, like for each one of the schools? So the fundraisers through the schools would either go through the PTOs, which I don't have those exact figures because each one of the schools has a distinct parent-teacher organization. They would have those funds through their secretary. That money doesn't necessarily come through the school committee. That's housed at your building level. It's interesting because the way that Gordon and Frank just spoke and how Mary alluded to it earlier, there's so many layers to budgeting. So Mary oversees the entire town's budget, and then as a school committee member, I help to divide up the money so that the schools have what they need, and then at the building-based level, all of the principals would have the opportunity to then make determinations as to how their school funds are spent. But in terms of PTO money, that stays with the PTO. They're like a separate organization who runs their own finances in support and in service of each school. Each one of your schools has gift accounts. We approve those dollar amounts, and we send them right back into your buildings, though. So don't know that I can really answer that question in terms of fundraising and how much money comes into your buildings for that. Your local PTO or your PTO secretary or treasurer or president would probably be able to do that for you.
So the question was, why did the implementation of the basketball court get approved the first time? Is that your question? Yep. Who wants to take that one? So I think they're talking about the outdoor basketball courts within town. There's been talk, actually a lot of the projects have actually been based around trying to implement and get basketball courts, outdoor courts, in East Long Meadow back. So he's asking, it got approved the first time, why didn't it get approved again?
Was the question why it did not get approved the second time? Just want to make sure I'm answering the right question. Budgeting, as Sarah just said, has a lot of levels to it, and each department or group of people, like for example, these questions about the art department funding or basketball courts or any particular issue, there's a group of people who want to support that it's important to those people. And basketball courts, indoors or out, are a great resource for any community. But if you're 80 years old and you can't make a foul shot, they're less important to you than they might be to you folks. And that's what happens in the budget process. The requests are made by each respective department, and people advocate for what's important to them. As the town manager, part of my responsibility is to be fiscally responsible. So I can't, in good conscience, just approve every single request, although I'd like to. So we try to be, each year, be somewhat thoughtful about whose needs are going to be met this year and whose needs have to be deferred to another future budget. And that's at the very base level. The person who wants a particular project funded makes that request and advocates for it and puts a budget together. But then it comes, in a school situation, it comes through the school department budget office and your financial committees and so forth. And the school department presents an overall budget. The town has no authority over individual items in that budget. The town council only has authority to approve the total sum. We cannot, by law, allocate where the school spends its money. So that's a little bit of a complicating factor. And then the school department budget is only a part of the overall town budget. I said earlier it's approaching 70 million, and as the superintendent said, the school piece of that is 30 to 32, 33. But it's all incorporated in one big bucket that is then presented to the town council with some preliminary oversight by a subcommittee of the council. And I think this answer is becoming longer than I intended it to be, but I think it comes down to what's important to the decision makers and how they balance what it's going to cost the community to achieve a particular project. You know, we have an ongoing issue with Heritage Park that for 3 or 4, if not 5 years, there's been a desire to develop Heritage Park, redevelop it, I should say, and create more soccer fields, a splash park, an amphitheater. That project is probably going to cost $7 or $8 million. And every time somebody in the media asks me what's going on in East Long Meadow, the subject of Heritage Park redevelopment always comes up. Yet it's been lingering in a sort of just like a hole, a budget hole, so to speak, because the expense to get that project moving hasn't been approved, and it might not be that important to the council as a whole, depending on who they represent. Last year, the town council, the capital improvement committee advocated for like $1 million worth of sidewalks. And there was some pushback saying, by a person who was on one of these subcommittees saying, well, who needs sidewalks? Well, a lot of people need sidewalks. I mean, I think if we took a poll, most people would say, yes, sidewalks are a good thing. I was driving home from work the other day and I saw a lady pushing a baby in a stroller on North Main Street in it's not really a bike lane, but it serves as one, against traffic. And I thought, no, there, we could use a sidewalk. So I guess I'm only pointing out that as an example that sometimes different projects mean more to different people. Our recreation department is really struggling this year with a lack of fields to support the activities of the town. Yet there's pushback because sometimes we don't want to buy the DPW a lawnmower to cut the grass to make it the best field conditions that we can do. So those are the struggles internally that we have, that we try not to make public because, you know, nobody likes to air their dirty laundry in public, but that's the struggle of a budget process. I have a DPW director who needs a street sweeper and a lawnmower in order to comply with federal regulations, and yet I have to fight, like literally get up and put my gloves on to fight to get those pieces of equipment purchased. When the consequence of not doing it results in disappointment to an awful lot of people who live here. And at times you think to yourself, it shouldn't really be this difficult, but it is. So I think that's why the basketball court didn't get approved this year. And I hope that helps you understand a little bit of the difficulty that the people who work and try to get these things done for you struggle with.
So my question again is about the funding in art. So the funding in art versus the funding in sports, how would that particularly break down? Because obviously there's more sports, so there's going to be more funding to that. But I would like to know, not like a rough idea of numbers, how much each sport is like getting funded compared to the overall like art program. And taking into consideration it's one big art program covering many different topics of art. Just saying like sports is one big topic of sports, but it covers multiple different sports. So how that really breaks down for each art class. And because there is multiple art classes here. I believe there is between 6 to 12, I don't know off the top of my head, compared to the number of sports that there is. So how would that work?
So there's a few things there. The art program itself has a direct line to the overall school department budget. Athletics, however, also has athletic fees that are associated with it. So depending on the sport you're playing, the time of year you're playing, the types of transportation, the types of insurance linked to being able to participate in a specific sport, all of that is kind of what creates that athletic fee, as well as costs for going into the sporting events. Those all go back into the account that oversees athletics. So There probably is more money within the athletics accounts, but those also come from different sources outside of the actual school department budget, because you're getting funds being deposited into those accounts from spectators who are attending, and then also families of the students who are participating in those actual events. So there's multiple accounts that get layered into funding athletics as a whole. And then the art department budget would come directly, like we mentioned before, from the school department allocating funds to the building, and then the building making decisions as to how those funds are going to be allocated based on the types of programming they're offering within each school. But again, I think if you wanted to look at those numbers specifically, that's information we can get for you. I just don't have all those numbers readily available right now.
What's the status on the new high school?
So what's the status on the new high school?
So we are moving forward with the MSBA, the Massachusetts School Building Authority. That work has been underway alongside of the town council and the town manager. The studies have been approved, the feasibility studies have been approved. Currently, we're trying to find the contractor who's going to be able to make a competitive bid for the actual feasibility study and then hopefully the actual project. But it's moving along. But again, we've all, I think, spoken to this, budgeting and projects, and all of this is long-term planning and requires multiple conversations and subcommittees and teams, and all of that is happening, but it's still probably a good 5 years to 7 years in the making, because it takes a long time with a lot of money involved and a lot of individuals both at the local level, but in this case also at the state level, who have lots of processes in place and different indicators and measures that as a school committee member, as the superintendent, as our finance, our assistant superintendent for finance, we all have different roles we have to play to ensure that that project keeps moving forward and that we're hitting all of our deadlines so that we can see that project through. But the exciting thing is we didn't have to go out and solicit funds for the feasibility study. That is a huge step in the right direction, and then that feasibility study will help us to determine whether or not there's a renovation or an actual entire rebuilding of the East Long Meadow High School. So we look forward to getting those results soon.
I have a question about you know how at Dunkin' they had like a drive-through, but like people didn't end up like building it? Are we gonna have drive-throughs in like the future for like the other parts of town? So we've definitely gotten this question before. Currently, it is not allowed in East Long Meadow for drive-throughs. We have gotten petitions before, especially during the pandemic, to remove that bylaw, but it's still getting some pushback. I think, again, the decision makers would prefer East Long Meadow to stay kind of be having that charming quarry town environment, and they are afraid that the drive-throughs would change that. So in a lot of ways, they're trying to protect the sense of community that is here already. That might change in the future. It's definitely a possibility. Everything in our zoning bylaws can be amended, and does usually get amended at some point as time moves on and technology changes and the needs of the community changes. So it's a possibility, but right now it seems like at least the planning board, who would be that first board to review that request, is in favor of keeping it as it is with no drive-throughs.
And just as a follow-up to that, with the change in form of government we had a few years ago, once the planning board would approve that, then it would actually come to the town council to actually vote on whether or not we wanted to change the bylaw in that case. So in that instance, we'd be the final authority deciding that matter. But I think it's different because at the planning board level that Bethany mentioned, they're kind of in favor of keeping things the way they are, but I'm not so sure that everyone on the town council would feel the same way. But that's the probably beauty but difficulty in terms of government, in that different bodies that are responsible for different things feel differently about some of those topics. So getting them all to align to change something can be challenging.
Hello, my name is Eddie Polk. I'm a social studies teacher here. And I just wanted to provide just a little framing. And, Mary, your answer was perfect. All of your answers have been given information and insight for our students for the tasks that they've been asked to do. And so as we keep discussing, we're starting to hear about petitions and starting to hear about budgets and cost benefit analysis and that sort of thing. And what our students have been asked to do is to investigate, research, explore their passions. And the state wants students to engage in a student-led, non-partisan action civics project, which is, I know you're familiar with. But a lot of the students, and some of them are a little shy right now, have taken on some pretty intense projects that you've talked about. You've taken a lot of collaboration, a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of energy, and they have a semester to try to get this moving, and some students will have a full year. But that's where they're at, and some of the topics that the students have selected, you've already mentioned: sidewalks, the basketball court, Heritage Park. Some are pursuing, trying to do something with the bike trails, beautification projects, that sort of thing. Some are also staying school focused, adding a course like AP Art. Some are looking at school lunches. And so this is going to be, and the state has made it clear that this part of it is not community service. Although community service remains an important part of what we expect, it's not part of the civics project. And so the line of questioning you're getting is they're trying to figure out how best to get started. In some situations, with the Dunkin' Donuts, the basketball court, people have already done this before. I know there's one group of students that's working on a plan for a proposal for that development project. On what street is that? Chestnut Street. So they've already gone into real deep research about possibilities there, but we know that's something that's already been discussed with town council. So one of the things that I think will be helpful for students to know, even though that some of these projects are quite large and extensive, what are the ways they can begin to, and they're in the research and investigation stage, so we're stages 3 right now, 2 and 3. It's going to lead to where they hopefully will be able to get a proposal, an initiative, a measure. We've studied the charter, we've looked at some of the zoning practices. What can they do to begin to at least get that process underway, or work with groups that already have done that? And I don't know maybe if the planning side of things is more to this question, but what steps can they take to begin to get the process going, even if it doesn't lead to a conclusion by the end of their time doing this project? Does that make sense in terms of the framing? I just wanted to add that piece. So.
Yeah, so I think if you had a project in mind, I guess I'll use an example of most developers who come to town and say they want to put in a new building, a new store, anything like that, they would probably come to me first. They would make sure that the use is allowed in the zone of the site that they're looking at. That's usually step number 1, and then they will go over their plan. So usually they come to me, they have a rough idea of what they want to do, they have it on paper. I don't necessarily know the cost side of it from their perspective at that point, but they're just trying to see if it's feasible before they go in front of a board. And then they'll go before one of our boards, usually the planning board, and try to get approval from them to even to use that site the way they want to. So that depends on, is there enough access to the site? Can cars get in and out without lots of traffic? Kind of logistic questions that need to be ironed out. And then there's also use questions. So will the proposed use for that site cause a lot of noise and distraction and smells or sounds, et cetera, that would disturb the other businesses in the area or the other residential areas surrounding it? So those are all considerations that the planning board would think of when they're looking at a project. But I think usually the first step is it allowed in the zone? And if it's not, you can always petition for it to be allowed. So I think really anything is possible. You just have to be really persistent. And whatever you want to do, you have to go to the other side of it and say, can this be implemented with the staff that's on hand? If not, how could we bolster that staffing? to help, whether that's volunteer work or working with nonprofits or other organizations in the community. So I really think anything is possible. You just really have to want it, and you have to show other people that you want it and help carry them with your vision.
So I'm a short timer here. I'm going to be leaving at the end of the year. But one of the goals that I did not achieve in my tenure here as your town manager is the establishment of a youth advisory board. As I'm listening to all of your questions and looking at your faces, you know, there's projects from year to year. I mean, this year might be your civics project about certain particular projects, but your ability to make the community better year to year exists with every new incoming student. I was thinking as you were talking about the rail trail or heritage or the 330 Chestnut project, those are all valid initiatives that take a lot of effort. But you know, you could also work on hunger or homelessness or domestic violence. You could choose a project each year. This was my sort of my outline that I never reduced to writing, and as I said, I haven't implemented it, much to my own regret. But I think there's an energy in the student body. You all have different interests, and I would love to see in the future, whoever the town manager is going forward, establish a youth advisory committee to work on projects, advise the town manager, because the town manager position does have some juice, whereby the person sitting in that chair can maybe create some initiatives or push for some initiatives with the council. So I would suggest that I'm just trying to plant the seed here for all of you who are going to be back here next year, or next semester for that matter, to just try to, you know, identify some group of students who want to work together on a particular project. And it can be anything at all. It can be recreation, it can be social work, it can be a planning issue, a site development. I think that would be a great way for you to become engaged in your community and get something done in a positive way. And it's a concept that's not mine. Years ago, I was working in the district attorney's office, and the attorney who was then the district attorney created a youth advisory board where he selected kids from all different high schools across the 23 communities that are in Hampden County. And each year, they had a project that they would work on. There's probably kids from this high school who are on that board. And it's just a great way to be involved in your community and get something done that matters to you and matters to society as a whole. So I would hope that there's a kernel of interest in that going forward, because I'd love to read in the newspaper someday that East Longmeadow had created a youth advisory board to counsel and give good advice to the town manager.
And another aspect too, if just broadly speaking, the town recently completed its master plan, which the last time we had one was back in the 1970s. And so that's a document that's meant to be a guiding path forward for different policies or interests that the people of East Longmeadow have and want to see carried out. And so if you're interested in a particular project, there's a lot of broad themes in that document, so you could look to see, does your idea align with any of those? And if so, it'll probably be a lot easier to move forward. But if your idea doesn't, it doesn't mean that it's not doable, it just means you'll have to garner more support to get it through and potentially changed.
I would just add to that, I think today, having the four of us here and, you know, the educators involved in bringing us into your school to have this conversation, we are more than email addresses. So we're more than people who are, you know, live streamed on Facebook and on LCAT. We are humans, and we're here and we're accessible. So if there's things that you need more information about, or if there's items that you are questioning, or we're not able to give you the exact answer right now, you can certainly email us, and we might be able to say, hey, you know, I can't do this right this minute, or this might not be in my lane, so to speak, but I can certainly get you in contact with the group or the organization that really could help you to further your project, whether that's one of us sitting up here or a different organization or department in town. But those are all opportunities that just through these types of engagement sessions, that it puts a face to a name, that we're more than just that email address that sits on the town website. We are here to work in service of the community. I think Mary said that beautifully at the start. We are in public service, so we are here to help support and make things better. But as Mary also alluded to, there's a lot of competing interests. And sometimes just because someone talks a little bit louder, or maybe has a few more people involved, that might rise to the top. But if there's a group here, which clearly there is, who have passions and interests, then working together and collaborating as a group of young people, that can also help get more traction and more steam behind a project. And being vocal about that, really stepping out and saying, no, this is important to me. I want the basketball court, or I want the art project. And maybe that's all it takes, is just really using your voice, and using your voice in the right audience. And I know you can email me anytime. All my information is out there, and we can certainly work to help get you in contact with the right people to get some acceleration to some of these projects.
Is it possible to amend the code of conduct? And if so, what steps should be taken to make an amendment?
Are you meaning specifically the high school code of conduct? So the high school code of conduct, that would first be an initial conversation at the building level. So that would be something that you would again talk to Mr. Page about, looking at it, maybe convening a group here to really take a look at what is working, what isn't working, and then that would kind of sit at the building level. If it was the overall East Long Meadow Public Schools code of conduct, then that would come forward to the school committee to be able to look at those amendments and make adjustments, hear individuals' thoughts on why things should be changed or shifted, and then it would go forward from that point. But there's other codes of conduct within the town. Were you just specific to schools? Okay.
My question is again about art. Why do we not have an honors art class, and how could we implement one into our school curriculum?
So again, this speaks to the layers within departments. So again, each school has its own budget and has its own program of studies based on the grade level, based on the content. So that again would be a conversation that you would bring forward to Mr. Page and engage with him around where do you see honors art fitting into the program of studies that's available. If that conversation was to gain steam and you were able to kind of figure out the educator, the supplies, all of that information relative to budget, whether it was a new employee that would need to be hired because maybe the current educators don't have room in their schedule to take on another course, then that would all come forward to the school committee. But your first conversation would really be at the building level to kind of understand where the trajectory for those courses is going and maybe why it doesn't exist right now. And it could be, like I said, budget, staffing, and then be able to figure out how do you make a path forward for a course such as honors art.
And just to add one piece to that conversation, so the art classes fall under our, what we call like our elective-based departments, fine arts, visual arts, our business department, PE. So a lot of those courses have traditionally fallen under the standard level offering, and the philosophy behind that is so that they are accessible to all. We do have higher level art courses, they just fall under that standard level offering, but I'm definitely open to that conversation about, you know, whether we differentiate between Art 3-4 at the standard level and Art 3-4 at the honors level, you know, because we do have those offerings where you can take 4 levels of art. It's just, the hope is that it's accessible to all students, so.
I think this was sort of mentioned earlier, but in stage 3, we need to provide polls, surveys, and media reports supporting our project and opposing our project. So my question is, where should we look to find this information? Like, for example, is it in the town meeting videos on LCAT, or is it like located somewhere else on the website?
I can give you sort of a broad answer to that one because it depends specifically on what your project or topic is, but some of the ones, if it was something that was already allowed or accepted per se, you'd probably find polls or support either just in local media publications, whether it was like the Reminder or Mass Live, or potentially even on the town Facebook forums. But if it was something that required a vote from some public body, whether it was the school committee or the planning board or the town council, or even an opinion of the town manager, you tend to find those in the meetings themselves. Oftentimes there's public hearings, which, just as a quick background about public hearings as well, not only are they advertised in a local publication, but that's the opportunity for the public to actually chime in on those topics. So once it's read into the record, members of the public can comment and state their position on it, and then after the public portion closes, then that public body would actually make their vote and determination on that topic for or against it. So in a lot of those public hearing sorts of cases, you'll definitely find the pros and cons, or people that are for it or against it.
I guess I'll just add to that. So if somebody has a question, they need records from the town, either archived records or more recent records, you can fill out a public records request with the town clerk. They will then send that request to all of the departments that it's applicable to, and we will get the records to the best of our ability and send them to the requester. So that might be the easiest way to get a hold of some records that you otherwise don't know where to start looking for.
I'd just like to take a second to thank our guests for coming in, talking to us, answering our questions. So just give them a round of applause. So the other thing is just, I'd like to thank all of you guys for coming out. You know, it's not easy to come up with these questions. I thought you guys did an awesome job today. So, anyways, yeah. So guys, we got about 2 or 3 minutes left if you want to stay here until the bell rings. Great job today, guys, and we'll see you all in our classes.